Look at that last section right there that's underlined. That's kind of where the majority of the talking that I'd like to address in this section will hit today. It's all about God's timing on things. Think back to when you were a young child. Early on. Maybe 2 years old. You know, they call it the terrible twos, I guess, you know. And for those who have had children, you probably can relate and understand. You know, have you been to Walmart lately? I mean, you know, it's funny for those who say, you know, we don't have a sin nature, right? That, oh, children are just innocent beings. Well, go to Walmart right after this service, and then we'll talk, right? And then you see it's kind of like, oh, it's cute. You know, they're having a little temper tantrum. The 2-year-old's laying on the ground and crying or screaming or throwing a little toy at their parent. Well, it's not so cute when they're like a teenager and adult, because then they're bigger and they're stronger. And now they're punching someone in the face, right? But it's cute when they're a kid. So ultimately, why are they doing that? Well, there's something that they want that they don't have. But do we ever really outgrow that? Now, we may look more sophisticated today. Maybe we dress up nicer. And maybe we don't yell and scream necessarily, but we get impatient. A lot of what I'm going to say is really just pretty much me admitting how I am. And maybe you can relate to what I'm saying. You know, I always feel like I play a good God figure. And I say that I like to say a non-sinful way, but let's be honest. I think we always think we can do a better job of what God can do, right? I always think of course, if I was God, this is what I would do, or this is what I would want God to do, or if God was a loving God, then He would do this, right? You ever think that in your head? Of course, we don't tend to think that when things are good and life is great and you're at Disney World or wherever else. But what happens if life doesn't happen the way that you think it should happen? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're a Christian, or even people who know Christians, doesn't it kind of seem like that they have just as difficult a time in life as it does with people who are unbelievers? Wouldn't you kind of think that if you were God, you would give maybe, you know, a little favoritism to your followers, you know? And yet, it still appears to be that Christians get cancer the same rate as everyone else. They go through tragedies just like everyone else. You ever stop and wonder, is it just random? Or is that just me that thinks that, right? It's like, oh man, I can't believe it, Pastor, life is random. Well, you know, get out of our Sunday school mind for a second, and I think we've all been angry with God. And if you haven't, then maybe wait till tomorrow, because it's going to happen. In fact, if you're a Christian and you haven't been angry with God, then that actually worries me. I want to say that one more time. Yeah. Amen. Oh, I love it. We need you to come every week. I love ameners. Just bring it. Mike normally is my amener when I bring up food. See? And obviously I can relate to that quite well. But if you're a Christian and you've not been angry or wrestled with God, then it worries me. Because I believe the ones that truly wrestle with God, and dare I say get angry with Him, are the ones that really want Him. And the reason you get mad is because you want that relationship and you love Him, but you're just not happy with the way things are going. Look at Jacob in the Old Testament. The guy wrestles with God. I don't understand it all fully. How does that work? I don't get it. I don't know. I mean, and then at the end of it, this angel wrenches his hip, so he limps around, so he's reminded he wrestled with God this whole time. Wrestling with God can be good because at the end of it, if you truly, truly seek Him, you will find peace and you'll find where true rest is. But you have to want it. See, a lot of people get mad at God and they just leave, and they're not waiting for an answer. You know, there's a lot of things that have happened in the time that I've been here in this world. A lot of things happen in life the way, if I was writing it, wouldn't go the way it went. You know, we've got, you know, friends of mine that are here today that they've gone through difficulties. One of my best friends, you know, growing up, he went through some difficulties in life, Bill. And if I were to try to draw that up, and I think initially, if we have the opportunity to think, this is how I would write out a perfect life, it would not have included the things that he went through. That's according to my humanness and the way I would write it. But is that how God would write it? Well, no, because that's not what happened. But they would be the first ones to say, Bill became more of a man after the accident. You see, that's the way God does things. We're here today and we're gone tomorrow. So if I were to plan a perfect life, is that it, or if you were, is that 80 years? 90 years? 100? Do you want to go past 100? You know, it's funny. When I teach students, they're young and they're cute, I guess. Cute meaning they're just, I don't want to say not smart, because I guess I have a couple of students here. But they're just, you know what I mean.
Innocent.
Oh, yeah. Or at least they think they are. They want to think they are. And so I'm like, hey, do you want to live to like they did in the Bible days, to like 800? And they're like, yeah. And I'm thinking, okay, have you been to a nursing home lately? You want to live like that for 800 years? I'm not saying life is not worth living in a nursing home. Don't take that out of context. But I'm just saying, as we get older, things start to fail. So, in reality, is it so bad that God has prepared a place for us, that there's no more death, no more dying, no more crying, no more pain, and we have perfect unity together with real bodies, by the way. Have you read how heaven's going to be? You know, real bodies in a real place, the way Garden of Eden was designed to be. That's the way heaven is. You ever read Genesis and realize, man, I wish I had something like that? Well, congratulations. You get to live in a Garden of Eden forever. So let's go back to that original thing. Is it bad then that God at times chooses to take some out a little sooner than they should? Well, wait a minute. Might be saying, have you ever heard this? And listen, I'm guilty of all of this. So like I'm saying before, this is me. And I'm just guessing there's one person in this room that can relate and understand this. God took them before their time. I've said it. Is it? Maybe before they wanted to, but not on God's timing. Nothing shocks God. You see, there's a false theory out there. It's called deism, where God is amazing and he starts this place and he like spins the earth and gets it going and he like checks out for like 6,000 years. And he's just as surprised as everybody else when tragedies happen, and he's just as hurt. But then there's the biblical God that actually is involved in everything. And he allows things to happen for his good. That's the God that we serve. If you do a study of what we have waiting for us in heaven, I am convinced when we do get there, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, remember, you notice I didn't say a good person, because that would have eliminated me. I say a follower of Jesus, because that's what a Christian is. Not good people, but saved by a good God. That's what Christianity is. If you're a Christian in this room, and when we get to heaven in the presence of God, I don't think we're going to be saying, God, why did you bring me here? We're probably going to think, why didn't you take me any sooner? And yet, isn't it funny, when people leave this earth, we're like it's before their time. You see, God's timing is not our time. And that's part of what being a Christian is willing to trust that his ways are better than our ways, even though I may not like it at first. One last illustration, and I'll get to the scriptures today of verses 1 through 13 of John 7. I feel like, at least myself, I'm like this wild horse that someone first put this bit in my mouth and they're trying to get me to walk on the path. I want to walk over here to those amazing, that looking grass over here. But my owner keeps pulling me to walk this direction to that path. And I don't want to. I want to go to every single, if you ever go on a little fun trail ride in the, in the mountains, where you pay for like an hour. And every now and then you get this horse that always wants to do his own thing over here and eats over there in that tree. And of course they're saying, I'll just, pull the side. And I'm like yanking the side of his, kick him a little bit. I'm like, I don't want to hurt him. I'm like that horse. I want that patch of grass. I want that water over there because I know better. But my owner is trying to pull me back into that dirty, dusty path. Have you seen where horses go after the trail ride? It's a nice barn. A bunch of hay where they didn't go to the hay store. Somebody else put the food in there and somebody gives them water and somebody comes and brushes them. Hey, they're a horse. They can't brush themselves. But they thought their life is better by eating that little bit of grass over there. If they would have just allowed their owner to guide them on that path that they didn't like at first, but at the end they have something better. The right time for me, Jesus says, has not yet come, but for you, any time is right. Remember that. If you don't get anything else from today, that's it. That is how you get a section of Scripture that, yes, happened 2,000 years ago. I was just talking to Cody earlier, Cody and Teddy, about in school. History, I didn't really enjoy it too much. I guess because there's a lot of facts and figures and stuff, Especially 2,000 years ago history. Wow. This is how you can apply a section that Jesus goes through 2,000 years ago, and you apply it right now in 2022. We're going to be talking about things like the Feast of Tabernacles. How does that apply to you today? When's the last time you lived in a tent for 7 days to honor God? Well, you haven't. But there's a big theme. And if you tune this out when I start studying the Bible, I'm not living during that time of a tent. You're going to miss the point. That's how God uses what He had back then and applies it today. It's still living and active. So join me as I talk about verses 1 through 13 of John chapter 7. If you have your Bibles, feel free to turn there. If you have your cell phones, ignore all the notifications on Snapchat and tweet and all that stuff. And you feel free to do that, or you could just simply look at the screen as we go through John chapter 7, verses 1 through 13. I'd like to pray before that God gives me what to say. Lord, I do pray that you will forgive me of my sins. Please give me every word that you want me to say. Prepare the hearts of those who are here. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so here's the section of the Bible that we're going through, verses 1 through 13. I'm going to cover this section, Lord willing, if I don't take too long on getting that. All right. So I wanted to start out with this first section here about, let me go up here. After this, Jesus went around in Galilee, purposely staying away from Judea, because the Jews were there waiting to take his life. That should be read, not the second one. Sorry, I made a mistake on that first slide. That first verse, Jesus went around in Galilee, purposely staying away from Judea because the Jews were there waiting to take his life. All right, it's important to understand what that means, and this is important why it's not a good idea to just randomly open in the Bible and start reading, because some things may not make sense. Where in the world is Galilee? What does that mean? What's Judea? And where is he walking around, and who really cares? All right, let me get some context into this. I just finished John chapter 6. This is now the first part of John chapter 7. To us, that takes 10 seconds to turn the page, maybe 2 seconds. But 6 to 7 months have occurred from the end of John 6 to the beginning of John 7. What in the world is going on during that 6 months period of time? Well, it's important to understand what happened in John 6. Now, you kind of focus on this little Sea of Galilee here. That's called a Sea of Galilee, but technically it's a lake. On this side right there, Jesus in John 6 had a big group of people that he was teaching, and they got hungry. Just like you guys probably are in about 5 minutes. And so there were 2 fishes, whatever you want to say, and 5 loaves of bread. And of course, he miraculously multiplied that to about 20,000 people. Yeah, the Bible says 5,000, but you understand that's only the men over 20 years of age. And that did not include the women and the children. So he did the multiplying of that. Afterwards, he goes up on a mountain to pray, and then the disciples start to go across the lake. A bad storm comes by. They get nervous. Jesus then appears to them walking on the water, obviously freaking them out like it would have been me. They said, oh, look, there's a ghost. You know that story. They immediately then go on to this part over here. And that's when, for the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about that he declared to them, he says, I am the bread of life. And I talked about before, that doesn't mean literal bread. They weren't eating on his fingers. That he talks about that he is the bread of life, meaning as much as we need bread to live, we need him for life. That's the background. The Jewish people didn't like that because he's now clearly making himself in the same nature as God the Father. All right? So they're getting upset. So he has 20,000 people over here. And now for the next 6 months, him and his disciples go away in kind of seclusion. 12 people and Jesus. And that's the background, because we know there was Passover, and now there's something called the Feast of Tabernacles. All right, I want you to be aware of the fact that down here is what we call Judea, in this area here called Jerusalem. This is where there were 3 feasts. I'm going to highlight this in a little bit. In the Jewish Old Testament era of time, there were 7 feasts that the Jews would keep. And 3 of them were required, or at least if you could, travel to Jerusalem. And that would be a long distance to do. In fact, you're going to find from like here to here, it takes like 4 days of walking over difficult terrain. You see, you couldn't go straight there because of the mountains. This is Galilee way up here. So his disciples are going to go from here all the way down here in a 4-day journey. And that distance is going to be quite a distance of about 12 miles of straight walking over this. So he's walking in this area when it says he's in the area of Galilee. Oh, look at that. Put the slides backwards. Should go up here. So now verse 2. When the Jewish Feast of the Tabernacles was near. All right. Feast of the Tabernacles. Now I know that's probably not first on everyone's mind as Christians because we don't necessarily celebrate this, Sukkot, but devout Jews still celebrate this. In fact, a good friend of mine who recently passed away, Freddie Malarski, amazing teacher at Leesburg. Actually, I don't know what he taught, quite honestly, but it was funny. Yeah, economics, but it's funny. I don't think I learned anything about economics, but I liked him. You see, but he was a devout Jewish man. In fact, they owned a place downtown, Getzel's. Yeah, for many years, and some of you bought suits there, right? He was one of those. He was a Jewish follower, loved him, and they went to the synagogue next to Mellenpatz Theater in Leesburg, kind of near the area where I teach. Every now and then, they would have this tent out there for 7 days. Now, for someone who doesn't know, they may be thinking, I want to say a homeless camp? Is that the place that the rabbi stays in? Well, no, you see, that's still symbolic of something. And they were celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles. If you break the word tabernacle down, that's a tent. Well, you see, that reminded the Jewish people of the 40 years that God had them in the wilderness, which is more like the desert, and they would live in these tent-like structures. So, to this day, devout Jews still celebrate what we call the Feast of Tabernacles. So what they do is they get in these makeshift tents, and they stay in them for 7 days, and they do that as a reminder that God provided for them and ultimately was their protection during that time of 40 years. So that's the background of what's going on that you see during that time they're celebrating. Now, Jesus later on is ultimately going to fulfill that, as he later then talks about things like he's the water of life, he's the bread of life, he is the light of the world. So we see this. that he's using examples of real stuff like tent, water, bread, light, and equates that to himself when we realize those things we understand we need that in this life. And as I mentioned before, there are 3 festivals that the Jews were highly encouraged to travel all the way down to Jerusalem. One was the Festival of Unleavened Bread, which is another way of saying Passover. Second is what we call the Festival of Weeks, which is called Pentecost, which that's real important in Acts chapter 2. And the third is the Festival of Tabernacles, or you may also have known this or heard this as the Festival of Booths. Those are the 3 out of the 7 that are encouraged that they make this long trip. So that's what's going on, and that's the background. Verses 3 through 4. So Jesus' brothers said, Jesus, again, see, this is if I was there, I'm going to give Jesus advice on what he should do. Just like I'm really good about giving God advice on a daily basis of what, it would be good if he would do. So here they say to Jesus, hey Jesus, you ought to leave here and go to Jerusalem so that your disciples may see the miracles you do. No one, Jesus, who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. Since you're doing these things, show yourself to the world. This is now starting to get to the whole point of the lesson today. What do you think have you ever heard people today say, I just wish God would show himself. I would believe in him if he wrote my name in the sky. Or, better yet, if God himself were to come down and meet me, and I look at his eyeballs, and I'll believe him. Really? Do you think that that's all it will be? Because look at history. Do you realize the majority of people rejected Jesus, and they saw him do the miracles? Do you really think our hearts are that much better today? Do we need bigger miracles? Is that really what it is? Do we need the Jesus show again? You see, Jesus knew their hearts. It wasn't a miracle they needed. Ultimately, they needed to know they needed him and not the miracles themselves. You see, in that, they're missing it. They wanted the show more than they wanted the giver of the show. And ultimately, it's not about being popular, it's about being right. And that's something that I think, especially our young people, need to understand today. If you're going to do the right thing, you're going to be in a minority group of people. And I say on a regular basis, if you don't like being in the smaller group, then being a Christian probably isn't the best for you. Because people are not going to like you, you're not going to be popular, you're going to lose some friends, you're going to have to count the cost. Is it worth certain things in this world to enjoy for a short period of time but yet lose your soul? So that's what they say, that he should go secretly. All right, look at this. Jesus' brothers. That's the first part here. Jesus' brothers, do you realize, didn't fully believe in him at first? One of them, James, the brother of half-brother. Actually, they're all half-brothers because, kind of the whole miraculous virgin thing. But James ultimately became the leader, the pastor, if you want to call that, the elder of the Jerusalem church. One of the, if you were to say, the biggest church, or the one that had the most influence in the known world after Jesus dies and goes from the dead. But do you know that Jesus' own brother James didn't believe that he was actually God in human form? Because he grew up with them. That's what I love about the Bible. You see, if you really read it, it's written so that from a skeptic perspective. Because if you're really going to make up a story about Jesus, do you really want to make it so that his brothers look like idiots? They were like, hey, you should do this, Jesus, because this is what the world says you should do. And another one, Judas, which that was a popular name back then. Technically, it was Jude. This is not Judas Iscariot who's going to betray him. Judas, who is one of his brothers, his name Jude. I don't know if that sounds familiar to some of you, because he later wrote a book of the New Testament called Jude. Both James and Jude did not believe in his own brother. Do you know what the one thing it was that changed their minds? It was the resurrection. And I'm going to be honest, that's what changed my mind too. You know, for those who don't know, I was a skeptic at one time. Grew up in the church, went off to college, indoctrinated into the way most college kids are to this day. Then started doubting everything I believed because I'm thinking, well, the scientists seem to say evolution is true. The English teachers say the Bible's false. I mean, I guess they're right. They're smarter than me. So I doubted everything. And I wanted to come to my own conclusion. So are you really looking for evidence? If you are, then hold on, because there's going to be a bunch. You just got to be ready for it. When you realize that there's no other alternative theory that makes sense besides Jesus actually rose from the dead, because there's documentation that Jesus is real, documentation that he really died, and documentation that that was the tomb, and no one knows where he is. And there was over 500 witnesses to testify of his resurrection. And how else could you explain his own family going from being scared for 3 days, locked up in a room, and then now willing to die, which, by the way, James and Jude will be executed. Are you really going to die for something that is a lie? No. And so that is the reason we even study this to this day. So his own brothers didn't believe in him. We see in Matthew 3 or 13, people would say, hey, isn't this the carpenter's son? You know, Joseph's son. Isn't his mother Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? This is just a regular dude, you know? He's not somebody any special. And they say, of course, you ought to leave here and go to Judea. And as I showed you before, that's about a 12-mile hike. And don't know if you've been on many hikes before. Maybe in Florida it's quite different. When I was in college, I was in therapy school up in Johnson City, Tennessee. My good friend up there in the program said, hey, let's go hiking on the Appalachian Trail. She said it's only like 12-mile hike. Now, 12 miles on flat ground, that's a long distance, but you could do it if you really want to. Have you ever tried to hike 12 miles in the mountains? I thought I was going to die. And I hate to say it because I felt like I was a strong guy. She was a tiny lady, and she embarrassed me. It was like going up and down hills and all this kind of stuff. It was not fun. So this typically took 4 days. You know, often we don't even want to get in our car to do grocery shopping at Publix or Walmart. And you're like, we'll just eat soup one more day. You know what I mean? You've all been there, right? It's probably like how we are today. We'll just eat leftovers one more day. I don't want to get in the car and drive 2 minutes to Walmart. And these people would walk 12 miles to go to Jerusalem for a festival of 7 days and then walk all the way back. So when they're saying that, that's the background. And of course they say, well, you need to go so that your disciples will see this. So what are some possible reasons why? Well, one, they needed more signs. Have you ever thought, how much more evidence? Okay, obviously I'm not going to have you raise your hand. But I know in a group like this, there's going to be people that, just the way it works, there's going to be people who aren't believers. So my question to you, if you're not a believer, what evidence would you need to get you over the edge? Are you wanting more evidence? Because I will tell you, when I wasn't a believer, what I wanted him to write my name. You know how to spell it, right, God? C-L-I-N-T. Make sure it's grammatically correct. I will believe in you then. Would that have been enough? You know, is there ever enough? Well, you tell me. Do you ever have enough money? Really? I mean, look at these millionaires. You know, I remember the contract a number of years ago, $100 million. Was that A-Rod or somebody? I'm like, oh, it's not going to top that. Oh, it's even more. What do you need to buy, a cruise ship? I mean, seriously. You find that things in this world are never enough. It's what are you wanting? What are you content with? They said, well, you need to have the world's acceptance, and for political reasons. Hey, a little shocker here. Jesus didn't come to be popular. And you may think, well, wait a minute, didn't he want a movement? Yeah, he also said, those who are truly mine, there's a narrow road. More people are going to be on the road to destruction. And, oh, he didn't really care about what's going on politically. Now, I don't want to get too far off here. Listen, I'm politically motivated as anybody else. And yes, I watch news as much as anyone else, if not more. And yeah, I get pumped up and I get mad about all kinds of stuff politically. And I vote, and I'll go out and I'll vote for people, and I'll politic and go out and encourage people. But at the end of the day, it's not the government that will save us. At the end of the day, laws are not going to make hearts right. At the end of the day, the mission of the church is still the same. There are lost and dying people going to hell every day. Does that bother you? Or are you more concerned about the next person getting into the office? Because I feel like that we have gone after an idol of government and lost our mission of the gospel. Well, either way, Jesus didn't really care. In fact, he said, pay taxes and you pay what Caesar wants. Was that a crazy amount? Absolutely. Do I want to pay almost $5 for gas? No. But do I sit there and pitch a fit and go on the ground and cry and scream? I want to. And I thought about it. But I did not yet. So ultimately, that's not our fight. Okay. For even his own brothers did not believe in him, I talked to you about that. So, here's the thing I want you to remember. So what does that mean? His own brothers didn't believe in him. You are not saved or being a Christian based solely on the fact that you have grown up in a Christian home or been to church often. You must be saved individually through repentance and faith in Christ alone. Now, I remember this really convicted me when I was growing up as a young child at First Baptist Leesburg. I would sit there, and as they would give an invitation of the gospel or to be a Christian, I remember thinking in my mind, I'm scared to death to get up and walk an aisle. So then I started thinking these things in my head as I'm sweating. Well, my parents are Christians. God knows my heart. And I'm sure there's some, group effort with this thing, And I was wanting to ride the coattails of my parents' faith. How many times do young people really feel like that they're believers because their parents are? It's really telling when I ask them, when did you become a Christian? You know the answer I get most of the time? I've always been a Christian. Really? So, you were born as a Christian? That's amazing! Of course, I'm being a little sarcastic. I may not be like that mean or sarcastic at the point. I'd be a little nicer. But listen, let me just say this. You're not born as a Christian. We have a nature that naturally is at war with God. There is a point in time, I can't tell you October 20th, I don't know an exact date, but I can tell you a zone of time that my faith became my own, and it wasn't my mom and dad, because I will just tell you, you're going to stand before God individually. Without your mom or dad there, and without your pastor there, it's going to be you and him, and what are you going to say? I've been to church 5 times? Whoop-de-doo. Guess who also been to church a lot of time? A guy named Judas Iscariot. And he kind of lived close to Jesus. And see what that got him. Being hung off a cliff. His intestines spilling out, right? So our church attendance, our memorizing scripture, our stop smoking and eating and drinking and whatever else we're afraid is the sin, that's good. But whoop-de-doo, our good deeds are filthy rags before God. Listen, I'm a Christian not because I'm good. I'm a Christian because I'm a bad man saved by a good God. That's what a Christian is. So if you're looking at me to be perfect, then that's not what a Christian is. And we should be broken of our sin, but it's not because of our efforts. It's because of what do you do with Jesus. That is important individually. So you have to think in your mind, what would you say? So Jesus said, and here we go, the right time for me has not yet come. For you, any time is right. I envisioned, like with many of my friends, that I would have my whole lifetime to spend with them. That's my time. I told you a few months ago, I had to do the service of a student of mine. What would you say at a graveside of a 16-year-old child who I feel like is like a boy to me, who walks into my room, standing next to the casket, with 50 people standing there, have no hope, what would you say? What would the world say? Well, there's some good medication out there. Time's going to make it heal. How about this is really tough? Let's just hit it right where it is. This is hard. I hate this like everybody else. This is not normal. I don't like this. And this is not the way the life should be. Amen and amen and amen. Yes. But God knows. He knows something bigger and deeper than all of us do. It's like watching a play and not seeing the people that work behind the scenes. There is something bigger and greater that is going on that we can't see in this world. Again, so I made the point. Okay, so he lives another 60 years. What's going to happen then? You know, are we saying that 60 years in this life is somehow better than eternity? So we got to understand his time is different than ours, but are you okay with that? Many are the plans of a man's heart, but it's the Lord's will that prevails. Remember that. Many are the plans of Clint Patterson's heart, but it's the Lord's will that prevails. So, did I hate it? Yes. Do I want to do that again? No. But at the end of the day, that's what faith in a true living God is that I can't fully explain why that happened, but at the end of the day, I trust Him. I mean, let me just be real. Do you really want to serve a God that you can explain every single thing about? You know what that is? That's called an idol. And that's called a tiny little pathetic God that does anything and everything that you want to do. And at the end of the day, you feel like you're happy because He gives you everything you want. But just like I talked about in Sunday school today, it's like eating candy and eating the whole bag. And you realize, I thought I really wanted that, but now I'm sick. Eating a bag of Doritos. You can't just have one chip, right? If you're like me, eat the whole bag. And of course, I feel sick. You see, there's a point, just because God may give you what you want, you think that's best at the time, I find some weird comfort in trusting in a God that I can't fully understand, but at the end of the day, I can rest knowing He has it. Do I like it? No. Can I rest in Him? Yes. And for those of you who've never experienced that peace, that's where it comes from. Peace doesn't come because you understand. Peace comes because you trust. And if you're trying to fully make sense of everything, you're never going to find it. Do I explain why a car accident happened and took the life of my student? Nope. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to say this is why it happened. I'm going to say, I don't know, I don't like it, but at the end of the day, there's a God that I know, His timing is better than mine. And that's where we've got to be. And at the end of the day, I can breathe, I can put my head on the pillow, not because I like the circumstances, but because I worship a God that I trust. And that is what joy is. That is what joy is. In John 8:20, He spoke these words while teaching in the temple, near the place where the offerings are put, yet no one seized Him. Why? Because His hour was not yet come. Okay, when Jesus heals somebody, often He'll say, hey, shh, don't say anything. You ever wonder why? Because isn't it kind of like everyone should know about Him? Well, because He was kind of controlling everything like an orchestra conductor. He knew at just the right time that was going to be His exit. It was going to be right at the time that the lambs are killed on Passover, on that time. And He knew when He wasn't supposed to be out there, and He knew when He was supposed to pull back. And His timing is way better than what we think. Verse 7, the world cannot hate you because it hates me. Because what I testify, what it does is evil. Don't raise your hands. If you're a Christian, have you lost friends because you're a Christian? You may think, oh, I don't like this. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Well, not that you purposely want to make people angry, but if you've not faced opposition to what you're saying and how you're living, then maybe you're not living the way God wants you to. I mean, young people are on social media all the time. I see what's out there. You see what's out there. Hey, have you tried saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't do whatever? See what happens and how long you're friends with them. You know? So, understand they hated Jesus before they hated you. We don't go to try to offend people, but that's just the way it works. Jesus says in Matthew, you'll be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. Verse 8, you go to the feast, he says. I'm not yet going up to this feast because for me, the right time has not yet come. Having said this, he stayed in Galilee. However, his brothers had left the feast. He went also, not publicly, but in secret. Oh, that tricky man. So he says, hey, I'm not going, you guys go ahead. And now he has another plan. Doesn't that kind of sound like, hey, you guys go across the Sea of Galilee. I'll meet you later. You see, he always has something ahead of time, what we're thinking, so that he has something better. Application. I want God to do this at this time. It doesn't happen. Or something bad happens. God, what are you doing? Well, just wait, because there's usually something that he has something better. Oh, and it may not be in this life.